Can you see my screen?
Yes.
The presentation screen.
Yeah, just hold on a second. Let Prashant start the
Sure.
live the live streaming.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Diptesh. We are live on YouTube.
Okay.
Thanks, Diptesh.
Should we start?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. Good evening. I am Ankit from Sama AI Lab, Chennai, and I'm working in NLP, graphs, spike neural networks, and biomedical signal processing. So, let's say, what if I say like everything is a graph and it is connected? So, whether it is power grids or vascular system or protein chains. So like everything is connected. Like as you can see, this is a Google knowledge graph. Like you can search and each node is containing some information regarding like how much important it is. So NLP has many application in the graph field. And why we are learning graph in NLP field, a lot of motivation. Graph networks can capture better dependency rather than any other neural networks. As you can see, recently we published a state-of-art paper in multi-level classification using graph network. Other hand, text GCN has also shown very good performance compared to typical LSTM and other sequential networks. So let's overview what I'm going to talk about today. First, I will give an introduction. What is graph convolution network? And while covering GCN formulation, later I will go through every simple example, like how to build a hello world application in a graph using deep learning. After, I will graph application parts, including text classification, how we can perform text classification using GCN. I will also cover how to use GCN as a feature extractor. So you can just extract the feature as an embedding and apply it with other networks. So yeah, so what is actually a graph? So in computer science, a graph is a data structure contains of two components like vertices and edges. A graph G can be will be described by the set of vertices V and edges E it contains. So edges can be either directed or undirected, depending on whether there exist directional dependencies between vertices or not. So this is a very simple graph. So let's start. Like we usually address sequence using recurrent neural network. RNN process each element in a sequence, carrying a state from a previous state to the current state, updating it. The state reflects everything to the sequence has shown so far. So as you can see in the image, a recurrent block takes new sequence input and its previous state over a few iterations until it outputs the sentiment analysis of the input text. So alternatively, you can think of the carry distance as a message that's passed from one sequence element to the next. Each element in the sequence update the message to the information about itself. So that is a message reflect the information in the sequence as it is processed. The same recurrent block as before, but now the message part is changed. So if you look carefully, you will see that it takes a lot of steps, elements called time steps, as the length of the sequence is depend on the number of uh, length of the sentence. Let's say we have 4 words in a sentence, so LSTM will unfold 4 times. So that is not a good formula for the graphs, because graphs can be arbitrary, big, and flexible. However, we could have every element send a message to the next one on the each time step of the sequence. This way, the last element will take the same number of time steps to gather information about the entire sequence. So just like we applied the idea of message passing, to the sequence, we can also apply it to the other kind of graph. So here you can see each node is sending information, or you can say message to other node. In each GCN layer, our nodes are supposed to receive some information from the neighboring nodes. So considering each element is passing message to the element it connects to, and after a few time steps with exchange, each node will hold messages. So, and this information at each particular node is a sum of the information of the neighborhood nodes. So let's go in the detail, like what is exactly happening there in that particular node. So for that, if you know, like remember how CNN works, a convolution filter passes over the pixel of the image in such a manner that we will take dot product of the convolution filter and the image pixel to get one final value output. We do this, we hope, like weights in the convolution filter when multiplied with the corresponding image filters gives us the value of the best represent those image pixels. So we can think of this convolution filter as extracting some kind of features from the images. Same as that, if you see on the right hand, there is a graph which is capturing which is acting as a filter, but capturing the features from the neighborhood nodes. So here you can replace the pixel as a node. Some like that, instead of image, we apply filter on nodes, and each node is having a d-dimensional embedding. So let's say Y2 vec or any embedding, 300 dimensional or anything. So each node is embedded with that. And next, after every message pass, each node sum up all the information from all its neighborhood nodes. So I think now it's quite we can compare easily like how CNN and GCN, why it is called convolution in the GCN part. So any question till here? Okay, so let's move forward. So let's see this animation, like how it is actually doing. So you can see like this node is having one node embedding, and this is one hop embedding. This blue nodes are one hop, and then it is aggregating the information at particular node. And this green nodes are the second hop information. So this is how it is happening. So yeah, so this is the formula given by in the semi-supervised classification using graph convolution network paper. As you can see, this is a filter matrix, initial node features as nodes is equal to words. So this formula is taken from the author has applied the GCN on the paper classification task. So here nodes are the authors and nodes is equal to also word. So it's a heterogeneous graph. We will discuss the heterogeneous graph later in this presentation. So after this, the aggregation is happening, and before that, we do normalize and then aggregation and then filter matrix. So yeah. So yeah, so as you see, like in this image, these blues are one hop, and then after that, this green part is the second hop information. So if you go through this formula, this single formula is actually just restricted to capturing just one hop of the nodes. But if we stack k and in layers, it will able to capture k hop neighborhoods information. So let's understand by a simple example, like how a graph works, like how graph convolution works. So for a graph convolution layer, it takes two input. One is n into n, which is node into node adjacency matrix, and second is n into f. So n into f is actually each node is having an embedding. So it is f is actually a number of dimension, like how much dimension it is having. A simple rule, which is like W is the weight matrix for layer I, and sigma is a non-linear activation function, such as ReLU function or any one. The weight matrix has dimension f into f plus 1. In other words, the size of the second dimension of the weight matrix determine the number of the features at the next layer. So this operation is similar to the CNN filter operation as we seen in the last slide. So as these weights are shared across node in a graph. Yeah, as I was saying, this each node is having a embedding. So yeah, let's go through a simple example, like how this thing is working. So we are taking a very simple example with a graph. So I'm creating a graph here with the 6 node, and then we have a feature. We have first created the adjacency matrix. So adjacency matrix nothing but it tells you if there is a path between two nodes, then it is 1, otherwise it is 0. So this is the adjacency matrix. And then we have assigned a feature to each node. So here I'm just for the demo purpose, I'm taking one feature per node. So you can increase the dimension like 200, 300 per node. So as the formula says, we have to multiply. So after multiplying, we are getting this output. But what this output is representing. So if you look closely, this is the output of first node. So this is the information, some of the all information of the neighborhood nodes. So for better understanding, look this. So this is the first node, and first node was connected. If you go here, this was connected to 3 node, 3, 1, and 2. So it will contain the information from 3, 1, and 2. So if you go there, this is 3, 1, 2. So it is a sum of the information here. As you go into the second node, I'm going here. So this is connected with 2 nodes, 1 at 0 and 2. So it will contain the information from 2 nodes, 0 and 2. Same goes for third node, fourth, fifth. So overall, this is just accumulating the information from the neighborhood nodes. So this is how the passage work, like the message passing works. This is the image we have already seen. Every node is passing the information, and then here we are just accumulating like information like this. So but we have two problems here. Each node is missing its own features. There is no self loop here. And the second thing is like nodes with the large degrees will have larger values in their feature representation, while nodes with the small degrees will have small values. So that can cause vanishing or exploding gradients problem. How we can solve that? So for the first problem, we can add the self loop. So that will add the self features in the graph. So we added the self loop. This first problem is solved. And for the second problem, we will use the inverse of the degree matrix. So the elements of AX are not normalized. So similar to the data processing, we use standard scalar or any other preprocessor, and we need to normalize the feature to prevent the numerical uh, issues like gradients, and it will scale with the networks. So for this one, GCN, we normalize our data by calculating the degree matrix and the performing dot product operation of the inverse of degree. So what happening here is like if I apply this formula on this inverse like adjacency matrix, and then we multiply with the same feature matrix, this is the output I am getting. So what is the difference between this output and before the normalization? Let's look at closely. So if you can see that this is the before normalization and this is the after normalization, and these 3 nodes was having same values, but after the normalization, they have this particular node is having less values. Why? So let's take a look of graph. Node 3 has 3 incident node, while 4 and 5 have 2. So go here, this one, it has 3, 1, 0, 4, and 5. And 4 and 5 have only 2, as you can see. So the you can see, so this was a formula like in other words, you can say the nodes belong to certain group of cluster. It can identify easily. The lower the degree of a node, so how many nodes it is connected, the stronger that is node belong to certain cluster. So in real life, like if you are having multitasking, you will able to like how many tasks you are doing, someone is hardly able to tell. But if you belong to one community or something, like it is easily like you can classify it. So same like that, if node is connected to many nodes, it's the degree of node, the stronger data node belong to that certain cluster. So, but in that paper, the author has proposed another trick, which is renormalization trick. So instead of having this term, he have just symmetry normalization using that form. And then after this, we are getting this output. So for the demo purpose, let's build a very simple GCN here. Whatever we have did here, it just a forward pass. So we'll build inside this function, and we will pass the uh, graph whatever we have built. So after that, you can see this is a feature this presentation, and then if we visualize the graph, you can see we have not even started the training the graph, but the GCN features can able to cluster these nodes in a two cluster. So if you go back to the see this all three nodes belong to one cluster, and this all three belong to other cluster, and this is able to find without training. So this is the power of graph. Like the features we have extracted, they are able to classify even without the training yet. So let's back to the slide. Yeah, so key point from the notebook, like in graph-based network, using the adjacency matrix enable the model to learn the feature of neighborhood nodes. And Thomas used the renormalization trick to normalize the feature in a fast way, a spectral-based graph convolution network. And GCN can learn feature representation to cluster even before training. Yeah. So yeah, let's go through one paper, which is text classification using GCN. So key points from the research paper is embedding the entire corpus into a single graph with documents, some labeled and some unlabeled. So basically semi-supervised words as nodes, which each document words and word edges. So assigning weights based on their relationship. So finally, our aim is to build a heterogeneous graph from all the information contained in the corpus. So the graph will look like this. As you can see, this graph represent red lines are representing document word edges, and, and the weight is given by the TF-IDF. Black lines represent word to word edges weighted by the PMI. So let's go through one by one, like how we can convert a text corpus into a graph like this and apply a JSON on that. So these are the steps. So first step is like text pre-processing on the raw corpus, which is usually we do in NLP, any NLP problem. Then building vocabulary from the pre-processed data set, creating n-grams, and then counting single word frequency in n-grams, counting bigram frequency in n-grams, calculating TF-IDF, calculate PMI, and embedding the entire corpus using heterogeneous. So let's go through one by one. Let's see like what is happening. So for the demo purpose, I have taken this IMDb data set, and I'm only taking only 5 rows for demo purpose. So as we do pre-processing in any NLP task, this is a raw data set. I did some pre-processing and encoded the label, obviously. Yeah. The second step is I'm making the vocabulary from the data set. So which is basically unique words from the data set. The third step is I'm creating a set of n-grams from the pre-processed data set. From the demo purpose, let's assume like I'm using n is equal to 4. So like as you can see, this is slicing the words based on the window, which is n is equal to 4. Then we have to count like how many times a word is appearing in this n-grams. So let's say this how is appearing 1 time, did is appearing 2 times, Mike is appearing 3 times. So this is a single word frequency in an n-gram. The next step is we have to find out how many times a bigram appearing in n-grams. So let's say did how is appearing 1 time in this n-gram, how did is appearing 1 time, Mike how, and same like that. We are calculating like how many times it appearing. So yeah, the most important information here, like mutual information, pointwise mutual information. So it's calculate like amount of information word W1 as to word W2, how much important they are to each other while they are coming together. So overall, like we usually take the positive PMI and we don't use the negative PMI with that, because positive PMI between two pairs of nodes means like they have a strong connection, so the correlation. So we usually go with the positive PMI. And yeah, we calculate the TF-IDF. So the main difference between here is the TF-IDF gives the attention over within the document context, while PMI weightage word to word gives a weightage over across the document context. So if you look how we are applying this, so it is giving me some value for each diagram. So how these two words are important in the corpus. So yeah, so this is the heterogeneous graph. As you know, like in heterogeneous graph is a like mixed graph which contains many other graph inside that. So as you can see, there are two types of connection. One is word to word connection, and there is word to document connection. So simple graph is like having one type of connection only, like word to word, something. So, so yeah, our final aim was to build a graph like this. We have all the information which is needed to build this graph. So we will go ahead and build this graph. So we have already converted the text data into graph. Now what? So 1 minute, guys. My battery is low. Yeah. So we will go through implementation of the JSON, like how JSON works. As you can see, this is the formula given by Thomas in this paper, and this is the code in PyTorch. So we will see like how this is similarity. So this is first we initialize the weight and bias, which is like not learnable parameters, and then we so here there is some mistake like multiplying node features into filters. So yeah. And then the third one is like in last part multiplying adjacency matrix with the feature. So support is an adjacency matrix here. Yeah. So let's go through one implementation. Like we are going to do some sentiment analysis with the GCN. So whatever I have shown you, it was on sentiment analysis. So yeah, this is a simple data set I have taken as I shown you. I'm taking just 5 rows here just to show you. And after pre-processing, like normal pre-processing, this is how, and then building vocabulary, as I shown you, then counting the n-grams sets from the pre-processed data set, and then counting the single word frequency in n-gram, counting bigram frequency in n-gram, and then PMI. And then at last, we are creating the heterogeneous graph. So, yeah, and then JSON model. So JSON model, as I shown you in that, so we are defining the parameters here and then values. So here it is semi-supervised learning. So the problem with this semi-supervised learning is if you train the graph and then if you want the inference part on the new nodes, you have to train it again. The whole graph, you have to train it again. So let's say after training the model, I have a new node. I want to do prediction on that node. So I have to add that node in the training graph and the labels. So label will be masked with the 0, and then I will train the whole graph again. So GCN will find the features nearby the neighbors, like how much it is similar to the neighbors, and then it will predict. So this is the semi-supervised learning, but there are other methods which are applying without the training full graph. So that is graph says and fast GCN. Yeah. So yeah, then yeah, so this is the model as I showed you there. This is just a layer, one layer, and then we start training. So as you can see, like I'm just taking the train IDs and test IDs, and then just testing on that. But the features and the adjacency matrix is from whole graph. So we have to give every time, no matter we are validating, we have to give the features and the feature and the agency metrics of the whole graph again. And then we start ending. So as you can see, in just 10 epochs, it's giving 97 accuracy. But since we are taking only few rows, so that was good. I just do like 400 rows for the thing. So it's giving good accuracy on that. So let's back on this. And so yeah, this is a paper from my lab, magnet. So it is using graph attention network as a feature extractor. And we are constructing a graph between labels of the data set. The graph attention network uses a feature matrix and a correlation matrix to capture and explore the dependencies between the labels. So we get the features, the sentence feature from the BILSTM, and we find the dependencies between the label using graph attention network. And then we use both features to classify the documents. So usually what happens, like in many of the multi-level data sets, there is a relationship between the labels, but most of the networks don't use that. They tend to ignore the relationship between that. And yeah, so as you can see, in this, I mean, we are using a graph network to find the relationship between two nodes, like how influencing and they are, how what is the probability like these two labels are occurring together. So we are finding that. So we are building the graph. First, we are assigning one word-to-vec embedding or any embedding to each node. So I'm encoding the label with the word-to-vec here. So let's say this is a 300 dimensional embedding for each label. And then I'm finding the correlation between the matrix. So how many times these two labels are occurring together, how many times these two labels are occurring together. So based on that, I'm building the adjacency matrix. So basically that is co-occurrence of the labels. And this paper introduced only two components, which is feature extraction and correlation. So feature extraction, I'm using the BILSTM. We are just feeding the, like doing the normal pre-processing, encoding the sentences and normalizing it, and then feeding with the LSTM. Then finding the sentence representation. So this part is done. The second part is via the graph attention network, where we are feeding the graph of the labels and finding the dependencies between the labels. So we are having two features now. And why I use the graph attention networks over this, because let's say you have a graph convolution network, so each node is contributing equally to the other node, where this is time consuming, and also this is like the weights are very static, but the influence of the nodes can vary nodes to nodes. Like this node is giving some attention and that node is more important. So this GAT introduced this problem, and they are applying the attention over every node. So they are not using the pre-equal nodes. Okay, so as you can see that this is the experiment I tried. So GAT was giving really good accuracy over the GCM. Yeah, so here you can see I'm using multi-head attention over the nodes to find the relationship between the nodes labels, and then feeding with a graph network to get the features. So after that, I will have both features from the labels graph and the sentences, and I will do the dot product and use the multi-level loss and then the prediction or training. So yeah. Yeah, the result was really good as like compared to the other approaches. As you can see, I compared the model across 21/7 different models. So it was also giving good accuracy compared to the BERT model. And I also tried CNN, RNN, and other models. Yeah. So yeah. So the main part of this network is like how we can capture the dependency. So this capture introduced, like you can apply the GCN anywhere where there is a graph. You know, let's say the example of molecules. So there are bond between the molecules, you can take it and then you can apply the graph, the features you can extract from there, and then you can apply some other networks on the molecule to get other features. So this was the idea. Yeah. So summary, like we have gone through like how message passing works in graph networks, how GCN perform aggregation, similarities between GCN and CNN, GCN formulation, and how need renormalization works, how to convert the text data into graph for GCN, and heterogeneous graph implementation of GCN, sentiment analysis, and the paper. So yeah, any questions? Oh, sorry, I did not see the chat. Sorry.
So I have a question. The creation of diagrams and all these things, the correct, like the word count and everything, that is a classical approach, and that will be one of the biggest bottlenecks I think in these approaches. And somewhat, I'm like, I don't know in which state these methods are in, but it seems like these methods cannot give a very good competition to models like BERT or other things. These are probably in their primitive states at the moment. Am I right about
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, I mean, if you talk about the feature representation of a particular sentence, then it won't give you that much accuracy. But if you talk about the connection between the words, like let's say in my paper, I have not used the graph networks on the sentence representation. I have used the graph networks to find the relationship between the labels. So yeah,
Relationship between the labels or relationship between the words, interaction between like
no, no, no. In my paper, I have used the graph network to find the relationship between the labels. So there will like suppose that there is a image and there is a horse and mountain and river. So what is the probability like horse and mountain can comes together, and what is the probability like river and horse can come together?
okay, so
So
basically it's a multi-class classification where we detect the probability of
right,
two labels or more than two levels of being together, right? The conditional
right,
the
right. So
total probability, joint probability of them, right?
right. So instead of just defining the probability, I'm feeding it to the GCN, more especially GAT network. So graph attention network finding like how much this node is occurring with other node, what is the probability, and yeah, based on the sentence representation.
So it's basically, in your opinion, it's a good system to detect the interdependence between presence of more than one labels and how these labels are correlated with each other, right?
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
This is,
Okay.
I mean, this is the best network to like find the relationship between the labels. But like as you can see, this paper, it was giving good accuracy till that text GCN. So, but nowadays many models are coming like GPT-3 and other models which are in, like too heavy model. So we cannot compare the text GCN with that. But even that, if you find the relationship between that, then it was giving good accuracy for
I
that.
think only one bottleneck that I see might be the memory constraint over these models because you have to maintain many nodes, right? Because there will
Right,
be
right, yeah,
so
yeah.
so
So
that will
they
be one
depend.
of the biggest bottlenecks, right?
Right, right. So, but there is one solution for that. So, in current graph convolution networks, the problem which you address is really a good question. So, we usually give a whole graph at once to the graph convolution network, right? And we build the adjacency matrix and feature matrix. But if you want the distributed training or if you want the batch-wise training, there are ways you can batch a graph and then you can train on that. So I mean nowadays it is not that time like it is same like the other networks. You can train it very easily. So you can train it in batches.
That's fine. I mean, we can train it in batches too. But what question that I had eventually is that see, like the number of nodes will be extremely high because if the corpus is very big, right, and there will be a lot of, and if you actually end up on this in terms of creating bigrams or trigrams,
Right, right. So
then
for
there's like a feature explosion sort of a situation, right? Because there are too many things already.
yeah, for the text GCN, yeah, you're correct. It will be very expensive. Yeah.
So I think this particular GCN can be actually extrapolated for different purposes, right?
Right.
Not just for text. That's why there is
No,
a good utility of this, probably.
yeah, it's just one application of that. Mostly GCN and graph-based networks are being used in medical, like you can say chemistry, basically chemistry and physics, and there are many fields where you can use a graph network.
Okay, so for structural prediction stuff like that, right? Because then you actually represent the complete graph, right? And you have
Right.
to find their locations and stuff. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
cool. And one small question, like the multi-headed attention, since you mentioned, was it easy to implement multi-headed attention in this situation, or it was tough computationally?
Um
And how many heads were there and stuff? I mean,
we used the four heads,
okay.
so it was not that.
So any particular reason of choosing that certain design choice, or like four heads?
If you go through the GAT paper, like in graph attention network, they have shown. Yeah. So if you go through the GAT paper, they have shown very good reason like why they have chosen the multi-head attention, because as you can see, like they can give the attention like how many nodes are giving particular importance to one. So you can try with other network, I mean attention types, but this was a performing well on their use case. So
Mm-hmm.
this adopted well.
Okay.
So yeah. So further reading, like if you want, so this limitation of the GCN is like for each time when you want to inference with a new node, you have to train the whole graph. And for that, if you want to explore further, you can go through the graph sage paper, which is really good paper. And there is no need of training the whole graph again. You can easily train, and then it will find the nearby node and it will predict like from which class this node belongs to.
One very interesting thing that comes out of this is that since you mentioned about when there is another node added or something, it requires retraining, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, what is the future for transfer learning in terms of graph convolution network? Like if you want to transfer the knowledge learned in one training whole cycle, right? And if you want, for example, generally that happens a lot in any of the domains. Let it be image domain, let it be
Right.
natural language processing domain. So what is
Actually,
your opinion on this, right? Like I
yeah.
would
So actually,
love
this is
to know.
the research idea. We are already working on that. So
Hmm.
in our lab, we are working on the research idea. So concept is like how do you do the transfer learning? Let's say in NLP, how do you do? Like we train a massive network on a corpus, and then we use the predefined information, right? So
Hmm.
let's take example of a graph. So what information you can extract from this graph? Like two types of information. One is feature of each node, and the other is structure information, right? So, but the problem is if you take other graph, the features of each node can be different from each other, right? But there is one possibility, like we can transfer the structural knowledge. So there will be somewhere the structure knowledge is giving some value to it. So we can use that structured knowledge. We can train a massive networks, or we can train small networks. We can find the structure between that, and then we can combine with their own embeddings, the features embedding, and we can train it.
Yeah, that why I asked this question is that because since you're using the presence of biogram diagrams and basically counts of words, right?
Right,
Generally, in every corpus, the feature representation will drastically change, right? Because that's the fundamental block, like how we are building up the embeddings, right? At the first place.
right. So
So yeah.
there are already many embeddings are introduced by many people in the like node to vector. So
Hmm.
where you give the node, it will give you a particular embedding regarding how many nodes are connected to that particular node. So you can take the embedding from that, and then you can combine your own features or agency matrix, and then you can feed it to the GCN. So
And
you,
does it make sense to initialize these word like of course every particular node is representing either any gram like 1 gram 2 gram or whatever, so does it make any sense to initialize these word embeddings with some some pre-trained embeddings at the first step and then train it so that it might lead to faster convergence. Does
No,
it make any sense?
uh, in text GCN, I'm not talking about in text GCN, but I was
I mean,
talking.
in any GCN, for example, let it be a visual GCN also. For
Right.
example, some object detection GCN or something like anything. So, if for example, like if there is a certain node which represents a certain thing, and if I
Mm-hmm.
like in this case, it represents a certain word, right? So, if I use some pre-trained embedding, something like probably some embeddings already from glove or something, and then that's the initial starting point for the graph. Now, graph trains from that. So, if the graph trains from certain pre-trained embedding starting point, will it lead to better convergence? Did you guys explore this idea as well? I mean,
Yeah, it is using the pre-trained embedding.
at the first place, okay, okay,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
this actually did use TF-IDF before, so that's what I mean. Instead of TF-IDF, if you would have actually like created the connections and for those representations, you would have just straight off instead of using PMI, probably using straight off glove embeddings and then training it. So might have been a different outcome probably.
So each node is already having a pre-trained embedding. Like those
Okay,
are the
okay.
features of the networks.
Okay, and the close connections are contributing some changes in that embeddings by PMI or the method that you mentioned about, right?
PMI are the weights. Yeah, PMI.
Okay.
So as you can see, like world to work connection are weighted by the PMI. Okay,
Mhm.
and then document and word are weighted by the TF-IDF. So
So basically, the embeddings remains the same. It's just weights changing, right?
right. So if this word is determining like how much prevalence it is having in this document. So that's why it is TF-IDF. And then
Mm.
EMI gives better confidence score in word to word, two words by ground. So that's why we.
That's why you mentioned that this doesn't give good representation because the representation of the word stays the same. It's just the connection weights that we are changing through, right? And that will actually correspond to interrelation between words or like interrelation between different nodes of the graph, right? So
Right.
so the primary embeddings doesn't change. It's basically the weights connection between them which changes through the training, right?
Uh, yeah, but embedding will also change because this particular, if you go to this slide, let's see. So each node is having some embedding, right? So each embedding is getting aggregation of
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
node, right?
yeah.
So
Mhm.
it is getting changed.
So what semantically it represents after the training, the embedding of any node, what will it represent after the training? Like, does it semantically represent anything
Yeah,
after training has been done?
uh, yeah. I mean, you can use it for other tasks, but of course, I exactly did not get your question.
I
Can
mean,
you?
semantically in the sense that, for example, if we remove the last layer from any language model, right, we generally get, probably like word representation, some stuff we get, right? Or if we actually consider stuff like contrastive loss methods, right, we
Right.
generally get them on the basis of the discriminative function, like similar things go similarly together, and that's the semantic sense of the vector representation. So what is the semantic sense of the node like, yeah, in that
Right.
sense
So
I'm
it is
asking.
finding the similarity between the neighborhood. That's why it is summing like this, how much this information is contributing to this, how much it is similar to that. So
So in some way it kind of falls in line with the contrastive in some like in probably in a philosophical senses falls somewhat close to the semi supervised way of
yeah, it is
yeah,
right.
yeah, okay, yeah, thank you, yeah.
So
Uh, Let me give another example of where we use graph convolutional networks.
right,
So we work a lot with pathology images. So these are basically you will take a tissue section and you will dye it and then you will see it under a microscope, right? Instead of that, you will scan it with a microscope scanner.
right,
So now what you see is you see nuclei as dark dots because of a certain dye, and you will see other structure of the tissue. So
mm,
we run a first CNN based model to detect all the nuclei in the cells in the tissue.
mhm,
So you have detected the cancer nuclei, you have detected white blood cells around it, you have detected the stromal nuclei, macrophages, different kinds of nuclei around in the tissue, right?
yeah,
So now we form a graph of these nuclei. So each nucleus has a relation to other cells that are nearest to it in some sense. So you get a graph.
Mm-hmm.
And the structure of that graph can solve problems such as grade cancer. So for example, in prostate cancer, the gland shape, when the gland is collapsing, it's a higher grade cancer. The
Right.
more chaotic the gland shape is, and when the gland shape completely disappears, then it is the highest grade cancer. So we have shown that with the GCNs, you
Mhm.
can actually do almost as good a job as CNNs, or even better sometimes, for grading cancers by treating cancers as a graph of cells and nuclei. Second thing that we have done is now we have started using these self-attention layers with GCNs.
Right.
And with that, we are able to do weakly supervised learning. That
Mm.
is actually telling us where the CNN or the GCN is focusing while
Right.
giving you a particular decision.
Right.
So for example, ductal carcinoma in situ, which is like pre-cancer and breast cancer,
Mhm.
there is a certain ring of cells that is present. That means the membrane hasn't broken and it hasn't become invasive cancer. And it completely highlights that membrane. It automatically highlights that membrane just by telling it that this is invasive cancer and this is ductal carcinoma in situ. So we are very excited about it. What we want to do with this is now take it to more complex problems where the pathologists haven't seen the pattern yet,
Right.
of
Right.
what makes a cancer more lethal or less lethal, more curable or less curable, and discover if there is a certain nearness of different types of cells, or configuration of different types of cells that will predict that treatment outcome or prognosis in patients. So we are quite excited about using GCNs
Right.
in pathology problems.
Yeah, I mean, it has shown really good results in most of the fields, but sometimes the main networks in that field matters. Like, let's say in NLP, so it can be used for some particular cases, but not all the time. So it is giving good result. But if you compare with the BERT large or XLNet or some other, so obviously it won't able to compare that much. So, yeah.
Good. Thanks a
So
lot.
I
Very interesting lecture.
So I think in Amit sir, what you mentioned about is if we are able to break down any problem in a configurational sense. For example, if we break down a particular big image into a components of sub images, and then we figure out how these sub images interrelate with each other, and then figure out our final solution. So
Yeah,
that's where these things comes useful in play.
yeah. So in fact, I just started talking to my students that can we combine like a few convolutional layers with graph layers after that, because it doesn't make sense to detect spatial configuration of parts using convolutional layers after a first few layers. I
Yeah.
think graphs are much better representation of these spatial relationships, temporal relationships,
Right.
than convolutional filters can be. So I
Right.
think some combination of, you need to detect low level features using convolutions, but after that I think we'll have to start using graphs. So that bridge between conv layer and a graph layer, that is something that we are trying to see if we can get some ideas to crack.
So
Right.
basically, these are abstractions in the sense that some like for example, the convolution layer detects very well about like detects the properties of a certain nuclei. But if you want to kind of make some decision about the whole function where multiple nuclei are there and how they
Right.
interrelate with each other, for that we would need a ConvNet. So it's basically like some higher abstraction of the system level architecture, right? Something
Yes.
like that, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's I hope that turns out to be great because the idea seems to be very fascinating for sure.
Mm. Thank
Right.
you. All right. Any other questions?
So what you were talking about that thing using the GCN plus CNN. So that's how they are using in the graphs is at some part. So
Right.
they first using the GCN to extract the features, but then they are applying some Convo2D or some other LSTM as an aggregator, like how they are summing the information.
Mm.
So you can use any other network at bottom of that. So you can use the GCN as just a feature extractor.
I think here, like every particular node, if it represents a certain CNN unit, then I think that would be the same thing what Amit sir was talking about. If every node is just a GCN unit, and every like not GCN, I mean a CNN unit, every node is a CNN unit, and these CNN units are talking to each other. So basically, it's like some feature extraction is happening at every node, and these feature extractions are kind of interrelated with the other feature that extracted, and they kind of contribute in some way to the end result, something like that.
Um,
So something like a dynamic summation of different feature vectors is happening, which can be
Yeah.
learned probably. Yeah.
yeah.
Sir, I have a one doubt. Sir, we can also use the GraphNet for face clustering, right? Could we use that? Like,
Plus, uh, yeah, but how you are planning to represent the image as a graph? Like one image as a node, or like uh, one whole image as a graph?
whole image as a graph.
Okay. I have not tried on Vision, but yeah, I think you can describe
Like
the.
how if we pass similar image, it's like uh, somewhat different but kind of similar image.
Yeah,
So it should detect that the linkage between the two faces, it should be closer, and the other, the
yeah,
uh,
you can.
auto generated.
That is really good. One of the application. I tried with MS dataset to cluster the images using the GCN. So in my case, each image was a node, but in your case, you are talking about the image as a whole graph. So I think it will extract better feature.
So can you tell me more about how did you done that? Like considering one node as a image, right?
Yeah, so each image as a node, then we are clustering which like simple clustering algorithm. We are just extracting the feature from the GCN, and then we are feeding it to the k-means or any other clustering algorithm.
Okay. Okay. So what's the final output? It's giving the graph-like structure where each image like
No, final
is
output will be the clustering, like cluster as we get the final output from the KNN, k-means
okay.
node. So there was no adjacency matrix between that. So there is a KNN, I mean k means neighbor graph. So you can build that neighbors graph using that algorithm, and that you can use in GCN.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Any other question?
And also, sir, can you share the your research paper or something that Satyajit is also asking? So
Sure, sure. I will share.
yeah, yeah. Thank you,
Share
sir.
with the Amit sir. He will share that too.
Yeah, you can
Are you
also.
asking me or?
Sorry?
Yeah, yeah, I'll share it.
Yeah, yeah. Sure. I will share
Okay.
all the content with you.
Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you.
And Amit sir, like, is there any portal where your research can also be followed upon, like where it gets published or something? Because your ideas also, like, I mean, is like are very
Yeah, you
interesting.
can. I mean, usually it's on Google Scholar. You go there and then you sort by year. So usually it comes up there.
Okay.
Yeah, if you go to Malai Kanan Google Scholar, there is my paper. So maybe you can find it. But I will send the PDF copy.
But I also, like, for summer technologies, I think I checked out the okay. So there is probably something present on your webpage as well, some white papers or some case studies, but scientific
Uh,
papers as well, right? So
I do
maybe.
have PDFs, but I don't have a website yet. So I will send you that PDF which I created for.
Okay, so there is one. I actually found it on. I can actually give the link of it also in the chat.
And you can go to
That
the
is
paper with code. So it is a current SOTA in multi-level classification, multi-level text classification.
that's great. This is one present in your website. I linked it in the chat.
Yeah. So, any other question? Yeah, you got it. This is the tip.
Okay. We'll call it a day then.
Sorry?
So we'll wrap up then.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the